to us. Before we start today, I would like to ask Reverend Glanton, if he would, to please have our prayer.
Most sovereign and gracious God, we just come before you on this day and this hour that only you could have granted us. Just thanking you for being the great I am. Father, we just thank you for this great country, for this great state. And Father, we thank you for each and every person within the sound of my voice today that are here in the interest of children and education in this great state. We pray a special blessings over our leader, Representative Coleman, and the members of this committee. And we ask a special blessing over every household represented here today. In Jesus' name I pray. And those in agreement said,
Amen. Thank you so much. Do we have any teachers here today or students? That's what's always a stand up if you're a teacher. Right now, presently teaching, and you just came to see it's your first time here. It's your first time. Stand up, teachers or students. We always like to recognize you. Anybody else, your first time in the education committee, stand up. Let us see you. If this is your first time being to one, oh, we're so glad to have you. Y'all have a treat in store for you today. Yes, you do. We're glad to. Where are you from, ma'am? Over here on my left. Where? Good. Where are you from? Good. We're glad to have y'all with us today. All right. Without any further delay, we're going to start. We have a full agenda. You know it's the chair's policy that we have testimony in subcommittee. We do not have any questions except from committee members in the regular meeting. However, I did make a statement in the last subcommittee we had the first of the week that on a couple of the bills I would allow some testimony because there were several things we added, and I said if the author so desired. And when I come to those, I'll let you know there will be some testimony. I think there was. Did somebody sign to speak on anything? Because they're not supposed to, but if they did, I think those could. I know it. That's why I'm saying that I want to. No one signed it. All right. So I'll have the authors do that. So that's where we're going. And I want to thank Gary McGivney. I tell you what, you are my right-hand man today, and I want the committee to know House Bill 91 got through the Senate. Unanimous, wasn't it, Gary? And we're proud of that. And I appreciate your help, my friend, with the state. Boy, he appreciate all your hard work and what you do for us. Now, if you'll go over there and help Fran present it, I'd appreciate it. Okay, first bill on the agenda we have is Representative Buzz Brockway. Is he here? Okay, if you'll come forward, and Representative Brockway, you can sit here or you can stand. I think you probably want, if you have anybody you want to bring with you, you can. And we'll be here in House Bill 414. And if you would, we're dealing with a substitute, I understand. So, and if you'll take that mic and just almost eat that thing and it'll work out well. And let's give us the substitute we're working with.
All right. I believe it. The one I've got here, LC 336102ERS.
Does everyone have that? No, I don't. So, okay, we have one of each then. Okay, I have both. Okay, good. All right, I got it. I have it. All right. Read it again one more time.
6102ERS.
That's it. Good. Okay.
And I should have stood up at the beginning, sir, because this is my first time here in the Education Committee. So.
Let's welcome.
Thank you.
All right,
we're
glad to have you. We'll be gentle.
You having me. Thank you, sir. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Coleman, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk to you about this bill, House Bill 414. And before I get started, I want to thank Betsy. She has worked tirelessly with me, excuse me, on this bill, and we've been making tweaks and changes as we've been getting input from a large number of people from really, I guess, all across the globe. We've gotten input from, but very appreciative to work with all these folks, and I very much appreciate Betsy's effort on this bill. And just to give you a little history of why I'm bringing this bill, last year the House formed a study committee to take a look at the federal government's role in education. And Chairman Coleman was our co-chair of that here, along with Chairman Rogers. And we looked at a wide range of things. And one of the issues that came up that was of particular interest to me, excuse me, was the issue of student data privacy. There were parents that expressed concern. There were teachers, and Representative Glanton was on there with us, and this issue came up. And there were parents who raised this issue. There were teachers on the committee with us and superintendents on the committee. And so I just kind of felt that, you know, we are doing a great job in Georgia protecting student data, but that it would be a great idea to put this into code and to protect this and to send a message to parents and to teachers and the public that we very much value the privacy of the data that we collect on students. And so that's essentially what this bill does. And it takes a lot of the things that we're doing currently and puts them in code. And it provides a way for parents to have access to that data, for their own child's data. It provides a method for if there is a complaint or a suspected complaint that can be dealt with, and that procedures are developed by the Department of Education, by local boards of education, by local schools on how to protect student data and keep it focused on what teachers need and keep it secure so that we don't have to worry about things leaking out that are not necessary. And that's the reason I brought the bill. That's what the bill does. We've taken input from the department and incorporated a lot of that in here. We've had input from the tech community, a lot of the companies that are developing really great apps that are helping our teachers and our students, and have incorporated as much as we can into a lot of that in here. And I think we have a pretty good bill that does what we want it to do and allows our data to be private and allows teachers to do what they need to do. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions as best I can.
All right, we're going to have some questions, but the first thing I'd like to do, if I would, because this is one of the bills we were talking about that we made some changes to in the subcommittee, and we did have some comment, and the lights are coming on. We'll have some questions in just a second, but before I do, I'd like to ask Bob Swiggan with the state board. Is he here? If he would come up to the, and I'd like for you to, because you've seen the new substitute, I assume, and you know what the bill says. And I'd like for you once again to let us know how the State Department Board of Education feels, because I know if people don't know him, tell us what you do, who you are, and how you're involved with data.
Okay. My name is Bob Swiggan. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the Department of Education here in Georgia. I am responsible for the collection of the data. I'm also responsible for the security, the integrity of the data, and making sure that it goes out in a secure manner. We manage the longitudinal data system for the state, which goes out to all 120,000 teachers, and all districts have access to it. So with that expanded audience, we want to make sure that we have all the data secure, all the privacy secure in place. And so we have most of these policies and practices in place already. So the bill that is being proposed really reinforces the need for that. It publicly reinforces the need for that, which is great, because you want people, when you have that broad of an audience having access to the data, you want to make sure that people understand what the security needs are and what the privacy needs are. So it addresses those needs.
Yeah, that comment you made, I think, in the subcommittee that you referred to is the fact that it re-emphasizes the fact that we do have these, and this just further makes it clear to the people that we are going to be very careful.
We clearly do these things now at the state level.
They're in law now, right?
And we can always obviously reinforce and make sure that everybody is aware of those things.
Okay. All right. If you could just stay there just a second, well, just have a seat or whatever, because there may be questions to you for Brock. I have several here, so we're going to take them in the order they came. Number 25. I have to look and see who you are. That's Representative Dixon.
Is there anything in there that is in conflict with the governor's original executive order on data security?
I don't believe so, no, sir.
Okay. And secondly, from the DOE's point of view, is there anything in this bill that causes you heartburn?
There's nothing. I mean, we worked with the legislators to make sure that they've changed anything that did give us heartburn, and they were happy to change it. So it does not give us heartburn. Does not give me heartburn anymore.
If it doesn't give you heartburn, I'm ready to vote.
Okay, I am too. All right, number 17. Let's see, where's that? All right, Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Brockway, we talked about the mandate to the DOE, and I think you guys worked that out in regards to the appeal process. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, yes. We last night or early this morning I received some suggested language, from the department, and we incorporated that in this substitute.
Is that in line, follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, yes, sir.
Is that on page 13, line 445? Is that what you're referring to?
It's a little bit higher than that. I believe it would start around line 429. And essentially, what it said before was that if there was an appeal, it would go to the state, to the department. And this, the way we've got it now, based on the recommendations from the department, is the department will develop some procedures, and then a complaint will go to the local system.
Okay.
And the local system will need to have people. We're not saying that the local system has to hire additional people, but that somebody needs to be assigned the duties of dealing with a privacy complaint should one arise.
So it would be minimum cost to
Yes,
to them, and we would have no impact on the budget for 2016. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good question. All right. Number 3. Excuse me, 2, all right. Stovall, Representative Stovall. All right, let me get you. Well, there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Brockway. Appreciate you bringing this legislation. I have a question, being that there's a lot now with the school systems having video camera surveillance in it. Is that also covered in here?
No, ma'am. We're focused on really the data that teachers collect on students, and that's used for furthering them doing their jobs. And that's the kind of data that's sent to the department, that the department disperses and makes available through the longitudinal data system. That whole issue of privacy is a whole different issue. We're talking about the data that is used for educational purposes.
Okay. So, say for instance, if there was data that was collected, say through the viewing of a video camera, and say it was a teacher that was watching, or administrator that was watching a teacher perform, or whatever the case might be, would that be something then that would be considered as data with that, or that would still go over to the privacy?
No, that's a totally, that's not a subject that we're dealing with in this bill.
All right, thank you.
Ma'am.
All right. Representative,
question.
thank you. Representative Dudgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to reiterate something happened in subcommittee. Bob talked about the DOE, which they're already sort of doing all this, but this does put the similar kind of requirements on our local systems to make sure they're doing it, and also on the business community, the companies who are providing websites that our students are using, to make sure they're using best practices. So even though the state is already doing a good job, we're making sure that everybody in the sort of the community is doing a good job with this. And I do, Mr. Chairman, have 2 small amendments at the appropriate time.
Well, when you just said that, let me address the chair. That was another thing yesterday that we had. There were some attorneys with some of the outside agencies we've talked about. Had that been satisfied? And
Yes, they sent
was it
information
major?
to me. No, sir, it was minor tweaks, and we incorporated that into this substitute.
So everybody that our students would contract with or use.
Yeah, and they're here if they.
Yeah,
if you
they've
want
told
them
me
to address
out in
it.
the hall they were fine, but I'd just
Okay.
like you to verbally
Yes.
let everybody know that's
If they
okay.
say they're fine, then I say they're fine.
Forever let your hold. You know what the pastor always says: pronounce you and forever hold your peace. That's
Yes.
right. So
Yes, sir.
okay, number 27. Let's see, Representative Belden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does this in any way, we do a lot of personal devices in our classrooms at home. Does this affect that at all, in any way?
I would say no, only because that's not. Again, we're focused on the kind of data that's collected and used by the longitudinal data system. So I guess I can't say it's a blank. If to the extent if a teacher is using a piece of software that might be used on one of those devices, and that ties into the kind of data that test scores or things like, or other educational data that they're collecting to. Thank you, ma'am. That if they're using an application on one of those devices that ties into the kind of data that they're collecting in the longitudinal data system, then yes, it would apply to that. But just students using devices, no. Does that answer your question, sir?
So if the teacher's using classroom devices, these things, as long as it's not being tied into the greater...
Yeah, and we were, that was why I was very glad to have the input from the tech community. I mean, as you know, Representative, the technology that's being applied into the classrooms is advancing rapidly, and we do not want to tie the hands. If there's a tool out there that somebody develops that our teachers and our educators think would be beneficial to the classroom, nothing in here ties our hands in doing that. And so, you know, we worked hard with the input from the tech community to make sure that doesn't happen. We're not trying to prohibit the advancement of technology in our classrooms. And so, you know, there are, as you well know, their devices are increasing in use. It's where we lock things down is when it collects information that teachers need in the performance of their duties, so to speak, to help them do their job and educate the kids. That's where this comes in.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Dudgeon.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a point. This has nothing to do with devices. It's all about software. So it doesn't matter where you access the software. It's what is the software doing.
And I wish I'd thought of that earlier. That would have answered your question a lot quicker.
That's why we have this technician sitting up
Yes.
here. All right. I see no more questions. Is there anyone else here that you need to say anything? I think we've heard enough, but if you do, but any closing comment, that's your cue. Do you think any closing comment that you have?
No, sir. Just I'm glad to have the opportunity here, and maybe I'll come before the Education Committee more often. It's fun. So.
We appreciate it.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, no, yeah, wait, right. I do have. Hey, I just spoke too soon. Representative Teasley.
Just going to say at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, I think that'd be appropriate right now.
I'd like to make a motion, do pass.
I have a motion to pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any further discussion?
Yes, sir.
If not,
No. I didn't.
no, you do have some discussion. All right. My technician here, Representative Dudgeon. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your folders, you see a piece of paper that looks like this. Betsy, being busy this time of year, I had to do the redneck amendment instead of the official amendment form. This came on behalf of Martha Ann Todd at Governor's Office of Student Achievement, that if we talk about state agencies as being a definition, they do contract work on some of that, their work, and we don't want to accidentally catch GOSA in the net. So this is on behalf of Office of Student Achievement. I think it's a good change to the bill, and it's printed, like I said, right there.
Why don't you just
go
over it?
So it just basically says that in the definition of these authorized staff, we're just including the contractors and the interagency agreement people they've got doing work that may not work directly for GOSA.
All right. All right. Do I have a motion for this amendment to the bill? Do I have a second? I have several seconds. Any opposition? I'm just going to say. Any opposition? If not, the amendment is approved. So now we're voting on
one more amendment. Mr.
one
Chairman.
more amendment.
Sorry.
Okay, good. I could count on it. I'm
Line
proud.
73. Line 73. The definition of operator, and starting in 69, has been, well, how many different definitions we had, Representative Brockway?
Quite a few.
Quite a
Lost
few.
count.
And we kind of bounce back and forth because there's a very broad definition of operator. This was basically capturing people operating websites and software who are not part of the education community. And there's a whole limit of things, and there's been some back and forth emails, and this definition I think is a little bit too tight and by the word primarily, because basically to talk about a website or online application would have to be primarily for K-12, designed and marketed for K-12, and collects, maintains, blah, 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 so all those things. I think the word primarily is too strong there, and I had some emails from some of the folks working on this bill, because basically we want to say we want these people to comply with this bill if they are being used for K-12 purposes and was designed for that purpose so they know about it. My point is you had some big website with a bunch of things that 90% of it wasn't K-12, but 10% of it was indeed designed for K-12. So the word primarily I think is too strong, and I have some feedback from some of the folks we deal with to do that. So all that, my amendment is to strike the word primarily from line 73.
All right. We have a motion to strike the word primarily from line 73. Do I have a second? I have a second. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the amendment is passed. Is that it?
That's it, Mr.
That
Chairman.
is
I'm
it.
out of your way.
All right, now we have on the floor the motion to do pass House Bill Substitute, House Bill 414, LC edu030415EDITED ERS as amended. All right. We have any other discussion? All right, all in favor of that motion indicate by saying aye. All opposed by like sign. You're in rules. Thank you so much. Did a good job, your first appearance. I tell you what, he did a good job on that study commission. He's an educator. I'm proud of him. We're going to get you a teaching job next year in the high school, too. You'll be good. GA and Paige want to see you right out there. All right, our next bill, if we would, is you still on again, is House Bill 502, Representative Dudgeon. It's our famous Title 20 bill. All right. House Bill 502. Do you have a substitute you're giving out?
It's already in there.
Already out, okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, pleased to bring you today House Bill 502 LC 336096S. For those people in subcommittee, the only changes in that were in Section 18, some clarification language from the PFC, and then Section 25, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but basically very little changes from what we went over in subcommittee. Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, I will just briefly go over the highlights of what's in this bill.
Does everyone have your list? Does everyone have that? Is the
bring up
list
the
in the
list.
folder? Show him.
The
You
list
have the
is-
list. Everybody have
This
that,
is
okay?
much better than the bill. This bill is, I can't believe I just said that.
Why can't we just pass this?
This bill, for those who are on the subcommittee, is a subset for the most part of what we passed last year in this House. However, there were some more controversial charter school related items that have been removed. This bill started with the Senate version. If what happened last year, the bill went over. The Senate took out 10 or 11 sections, most related to charter schools and a couple other things the teachers groups had some heartburn about. And so I have tried this year to go on the non-controversial mode, and so I believe that nothing in here hopefully is controversial, but we'll let the committee make the decision about that. So now we'll go back over it because I know we have some new members also. Section 1 is just a population bill. They're illegal, and we're just repealing it. Section 2 is new. The governor's office came to us and requested that. The code probably already says this. I want to make it very clear that the new teacher evaluation system is not waivable by the different people who can waive things. State boards can waive things. State Charter Commission can waive things. There's a list of things you can't waive, and it adds teacher evaluations to that list, again, requested by the governor's office. So you'll see a lot of these starting in Section 3.4. This code was written a long time ago, and it talks about...
What I'm going to do, if
Yes.
you don't mind, when
Sure.
they have a question there, keep them going back. I have a question on that one. All right,
Yes, sir.
Representative Dickerson?
Yes, sir.
Do we not already have some systems that have waivers on
Teeks
the
and leaks?
valuation system?
I don't think on Teeks and Leaks. I think, is Representative Nick still here? I
Do we
believe
not?
that,
Not on leaks and leaks.
not on Teeks and
State
Leaks. I think
Department,
the old- yeah,
I see
No.
Gary back
Okay.
there saying no.
yeah.
I'll take his word for it.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank
Mr. Chairman. Section 3 and 4 and a whole bunch of other ones follow. The old code talked about the state setting curriculum, and that's the old model. The state now sets standards and local set curriculum. Section 5, in 2012, we passed 2 bills related to online learning, one from Representative Casas, one from Senator Rogers. And they both had sort of a certification review process for getting these online courses, and we passed them both in the same year. They both went in the code. In conversation with Bob Swigum, the department, we've sort of consolidated on one of those passed, which they believe is the best one for their department, just repealing one of those guys there. 6 is another standards one. 7 is just a paperwork elimination. There's a report in there that's not really used, so we're going to make that report optional. Section 8, as you recall, in 2012, after the QB Study Commission, we changed the funding formula for middle school grades versus middle school program. We made that just the higher funding formula, and so all this code that was about how to be a middle school is now irrelevant because we're funding at the higher level. And so this is just cleaning that up and eliminating all that middle grades language because it's not relevant anymore. Skipping to the next new thing, if you see 9, 10, 11, 12 are about standards, 13, 14, 15, 16 about middle school, 17 standards again. So 18 is new this year. This is requested by some groups and worked with Kelly Henson at the Public Service Commission and Legislative Council. just to make sure that the PSC has the authority and the right ability to certify teachers who might be out of state, but they're teaching a virtual class in Georgia. They may be living in Baltimore, but they're teaching a class in Georgia. Want to make sure the PSC is able to certify them just like anybody else. That's Section 18. And there was a technical change in that. The actual underlying area was changed at Legislative Council just to clean it up a little bit, but the intent is still there. And that's a change from the last subcommittee. Section 19, we're getting some stuff the department has asked for a couple years ago, that right now that the superintendent has to sign every contact, so they're chasing the superintendent around all the time trying to find him. And this allows the chief financial officer to sign them less than $50,000. The superintendent is still responsible. It just allows the execution to be by the CFO. State standards, once again, we have another section on the teacher evaluations. 22 is a really good thing, and I think, Mr. Chairman, you kind of bumped on this with House Bill 91. Right now, if the student board wants to do a student waiver, they have to use the Administrative Procedures Act of the Secretary of State, which is a giant bureaucratic nightmare with postings and back and forth to Secretary of State and 30 days of this and all kinds of stuff and paperwork everywhere. And that's one reason why the HB 91 waivers were so slow. So this allows the state board to have their own waiver process. It's still a due process situation, just they get to own it, don't have to involve the Secretary of State. So that's a request of the state board, our state board friends. 23 was in last year. The Senate took it out. I'm putting it back in, and if the committee takes it out or the Senate does, then I've tried. It is because I'm passionate about it, and that says that capital outlay would also include computer equipment. And in my opinion, in the 21st century, technology is just as important as bricks and mortars, and I see no reason not to include that in the capital program. So that's Section 23. Again, that passed the House last year, was taken out by the Senate. So that's only one of the few things I've tried to see if the Senate will play ball again this year. Section 24, more standards things. Section 25, boy, we worked a lot on Section 25, and Mr. Chairman actually pointing out, actually you have part of Section 25 in House Bill 91, and Betsy and I have worked with the department at great lengths to clarify how the testing is done. A long story short, we're just truing up the code to what the state board is doing now. With the milestones assessment, with no graduation test, we're basically just truing up the code to exactly what we were doing at the state board today. It's long and involved, but basically once you read it, it matches exactly what we're doing today. More middle grades. 27 is just, in the budget a couple years ago, they moved the Governor's Honors Program to GOSA, and this just does that in the code since it's already done in the budget. Got more standards. 29 is another getting rid of an obsolete report. Section 30, again, Bob Swig and I have worked on this the past several years. The original Georgia Virtual School funding was supposed to be a lot more than it was, and when had more people apply for slots than they had funding for, and came up through consultation with some legislative leaders a couple years ago with a way to allocate that, and it's a fair way, and we're putting it in the code. And it also does clarify that that $250 cap on the cost. 31 and 32 or more fallout from the two online bills the same year as playing that duplicate thing. 33 is yet another obsolete report. 36, homeschoolers. It's always sensitive when we talk about homeschoolers. When this bill first came out and talk about homeschoolers, we had some issues with the homeschool community, but we ended up with a compromise. All it's basically saying is that the homeschoolers, when they file their annual report, they just put their local school system where they're located, just so it will be easy just to aggregate data about where our homeschoolers are. 3738 is another great thing. If the local board is in financial trouble and has hard times meeting their insurance payments with the DCH, then right now the only statutory remedy that DOE has is to completely cut off their QBE, and that's really the death penalty to a local system. They really couldn't do that. This allows them to have a more gradated sort of a proportional withdrawal thing, and that would be much better, in both Department of Ed and Community Health are in agreement on that. 39, we moved the teacher contract thing to May 15th a couple years ago. We missed a piece, and that's in here. Section 40, right now if the state board has an appeal from a local board, like a disciplinary case, all they can do is reverse it. They can't do anything else. This allows them to affirm, reverse, or remand, or get mediators. This will hopefully greatly improve the process of appeals for the state board. We're back to, this is all new stuff at this point now, or getting, not new from the new from what passed the Senate last year. 41, we're again with another wave of teacher performance. 42, the current code makes charter schools do a report every year. This will move it to November 1st instead of October 1. This allows them to include the October 15th QB count, gives them a better report. 43 says that local school boards have 90 days to approve a charter instead of 60. Section 44, again, is something that the Senate took out, but we've funded it this way for the past 3 budget years. It's a very technical decision about how to do with a virtual state charter school and 5 mil share. Since they didn't do property taxes, it gets very complicated. This is a technical thing. It's funded this way in the past 3 budgets. We're just truing up the code to what has been funded. And then our former Representative Chuck Sims had a population bill related to education last year that we also missed, and in his honor, we're going to add it in as the last section here to repeal this population bill that Representative Sims found. Mr. Chairman, that's it. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
We have 2 or 3 questions. All right, Representative Dixon.
If I can take you back, excuse me, to Section 30 where we talk about the virtual school funding.
Yes, sir.
You have in there when the local school funds a course, if the student is taking more courses than are required or something to that language, then the student has to start paying the cost of it?
That's correct. We wanted to make sure that some kid didn't think that they got 10 courses free from the local board and make the local board pay all that money.
Do we not apply the same logic to students in virtual schools and or homeschool?
But the virtual schools and homeschoolers slots are, Bob can answer that. I don't think they allow, when they're rationing the slots, they don't give one kid 10 slots, another kid 2 or whatever. I think there's a more even thing. I don't.
You want to let
I don't
Bob
think that's a
comment?
real
Want
case.
to let
I don't
Bob
know,
comment? He's up.
Bob, we don't have that case where we have one virtual student getting a lot of courses and some little, right?
What we do is we have the 4,000 seats,
Yeah.
and we open it up 2,000 per semester,
Yeah.
and it's a first come, first serve. So if a homeschool parent wants to sign up
that's
for
right.
6 courses, they'll get 6 courses.
But they're not going to get 12, though. They're not going to get
No,
What if they
no.
get
No,
7?
they won't get more
Yeah.
than the 6.
That's right.
Okay, so you limit to 6.
Yeah. Same thing the locals do. Yeah.
Okay.
That answer your questions? Okay. Number 29, Representative Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't find this section, Representative Dudgeon, but on the change from 60 to 90 days, I'm just curious for the petition charter school where that came from.
That's section 43.
Section
No,
43.
I know, but I'm asking where the request came from. Okay. Actually, I think I got my answer. Thank you.
Great. I'm glad to be helpful.
Any other questions? All right, now what I'm going to do, Betsy, we're not ready yet, are we? I am going to ask you to stand easy because I have an amendment. Let me just tell you what I didn't mean to surprise you, but I just got it.
You did, Mr. Chairman.
First time, no. What has happened in our visits around the state last year, several of you were with us, and with our 5, a lot of the superintendents were concerned about the name IE Square, charter system, and status quo. They didn't understand what it meant. You know, charter system's okay. IE Square, what does that mean? Education jargonese, they said, and they surely didn't want to be status quo. I have been in contact with the Senate, and they have agreed, and just 15 minutes before the session started, I'm sorry, Mr. that didn't get with you, Representative Dudgeon, but Betsy has a placeholder that we're going to place in the bill, and we're going to bring a group together. We're going to look at some names that other than leaving charter system, but we're looking at IE Square and status quo, and we're going to, is that about right, Betsy, what we're talking about? And I want to bring that, and she's having the copies come. It's not here yet. So if we just stand down a second, let everybody look at that, and then we'll go. And we felt that it would be best, instead of doing a separate bill, we could do that, but maybe put it in the time. And they've agreed in the Senate that they'll take it and they will not take it out.
They agreed to the names, or just agreed to doing something?
Sir?
Have they agreed to the names?
Oh, no, that's what we're going to discuss. In other words, we're going to put the placeholder in with the changes. That's what we're going to look at and see if we can do that. Is that correct, Betsy? And then we'll decide on the names. But that'll be in when we present to the Senate. If it passes, and we could even possibly do that in the House rules if we get the names soon enough. So if we'll stand down, and then let's go to the next bill, if you would, and we'll take any questions now before we go. we want to debate this a little more. You have one, Representative Carter. Okay, Representative Dudgeon.
With that name change, is there an option for us to extend it a year? Actually,
Is there what?
an option to extend that choice by 1 year?
They will not agree to that. They will not agree to that.
I can testify.
We've tried that.
I can
We've
testify
tried.
to that myself.
How long did we try that, Representative Dudgeon?
Ever since I've been
For 2
here, Mr.
years.
Chairman.
All right, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. All right, this time I'd like to ask Representative Robert Dickey, and I apologize to you, Representative. Are you here? Yeah. I'll tell you what. Now, this is your first time also, isn't it? Yeah, and so we're glad to have you. And when are the peaches going to be ready?
They're going to be ready. They're going to be ready about the second week in May.
Looking good?
Looking good.
Looking good.
I've got something else looking good today.
Hey, I know you have. We're ready.
You're going to like this bill.
All right. You're right on. Okay.
So I bring for you this morning, this afternoon, committee, HB 313, LC 400788. This bill's a lot simpler than Representative Dudgeon's.
I may not want to do that.
And I think y'all got a couple of handouts that I put in the packet.
In the back of everyone's folder.
So anyway, we got this program. The governor is very fond of this, and it's called the GIVE program, Georgia Initiative of Volunteering and Education. It would give state employees, very, very straightforward, 8 hours of additional paid leave to volunteer their services and time in schools, mentoring or volunteering, doing whatever type of work they think is best. We're just very excited about this program. It's kind of a set forth a path for state employees to improve the educational and economic interest of our school system. It would be administered and all the policy and guidelines by Human Resources over at DOAS. It would grant, as I said, full-time, not part-time, but full-time state employees up to 8 hours additional leave. And, you know, we have about 67,000 state employees in the state now. This would amount to 540,800 potential new focused volunteer hours. Many other states have this program, and some of them have many more hours than 8. But this would get us started. As I said, the rules and regulations are not in the bill, but Human Resources would develop those. I just wanted to read, if I could take a few minutes to read about some of the benefits of this program, and I put it in there for y'all, so I don't want to be redundant. But the earlier in a child's education process parental involvement begins, the more powerful effects. They've done studies where parental involvement, they find in other states, is the biggest problem facing public schools. I don't know if you agree with that, but it is big. Family participation in education has twice the predictive of student academic success as socioeconomic status. And you can go down this list. Now, it was just pretty shocking to me to see how much parental involvement made a difference in a child's educational outcome. And this bill is a start for it. It's not but 8 hours, but I think it just sets the precedent for our state employees to set the bar. Hopefully, other private industry will see the benefits from it if the state is involved and committed to this. And it will get the ball rolling and really shows how much we think as a state that the parental involvement is in our school system. So this is what the governor really has put forth and likes, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. We've got some experts here behind me from HRA that could answer any specific questions about how this program might be implemented or the policies behind it.
Thank you. What I'm going to do, we're going to take questions for you, and then I will, as I agreed, since this is in full committee, no discussion, I'll allow some some comments and you can have others speak if you want to. Let's take the questions now in this order as they came up. Again, number 23, Representative Nix.
Yes, thank you. I like the concept, but be clear, this is not just for parents. If you happen to not have children, you could be a mentor.
Absolutely. You could volunteer to do whatever your heart thinks best in any school, in any setting that you want to. So,
any state employee.
It is not just for parents. It's for all state employees, whatever interest they have in education.
Okay. All right. Is it, all right, number 29, Representative Kaiser.
I think Representative Nix just got part of the answer for me. So it's not just parental involvement. Someone who could go out and just be a reading mentor across the state.
Absolutely. I hope that's what we do. Yes.
I do as well. But how would, I don't think it would be abused, but how would you document or verify that you've used those 8 hours to go and?
The concept would be that they would ask for this time from their supervisors. It is not going to be just arbitrarily given, and you know, we might have some situations where the time is not appropriate to be able to take this time off if they're busy or some other type of thing. So they will develop some pretty strict guidelines of the process to go through, apply, and ask for this time to go. So.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Accardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question. As a teacher in a high school, what are your thoughts, or would you promote our colleagues, state legislators, spending 8 hours in a classroom in any of our public schools around the state for this bill?
I think it would be great.
I think it'd be wonderful.
You know, I do. I go and read to 2 or 3 schools.
Is that a proposed amendment?
I like it.
I like it. I like it. Overnight
Do I get
stay.
to pick the classroom?
Overnight stay with
however, Representative Carter, I think we're classified as non-full-time employees of the state. And this would be only for full-time employees.
I do like the amendment then.
We could amend it, you know, we could amend that, yeah.
It's been my intention for years to have some of my colleagues in the legislature to spend really a full week in a public school. I have different areas, start in the elementary, go to the middle, go to the high, do a special needs, ESOL.
In order to qualify for committee assignments, you have to get your staff development. I like
That's
that
right.
one.
Thank you.
Representative Dixon.
For purposes of this bill, would public school teachers be considered state employees?
That's a good question. Good question.
I will maybe have to refer.
You want to call on someone?
Yes.
Who can answer that question? Come forward, please.
Katie, or Kathy?
Tom, I think they're employees of the local board.
They are. Yeah. No, they're employees. No, they're employees of the state. Come to the microphone where we can hear you. You stand up there at the one at the where everyone can hear. Yeah, right there at the podium. Thank you.
So I have to give you a wishy-washy answer here in terms of certain teachers. As you'll note in the language there, this will be administered through the State Personnel Board, and those State Personnel Board rules do not apply to Board of Regents, but they do apply to Department of Education, the technical schools.
That's what I thought.
So I hope, is that responsive?
They do.
Yes.
Because they're state, other than locally hired teachers, right?
But that just speaks to the rules and how the part that we would administer. Of course, the language says all state employees, so I think that would be full encompassing, but in terms of administering, it would be incumbent on Board of Regents to come up with their own approach.
Okay.
We're talking about K-12, I think.
Yeah, we're talking about K-12. Well, she said Board of Regents. Representative Carter.
So the local systems, the same comment would apply. They would come up with how they would administer. Where the board rules would only address in the executive branch and only certain executive branch entities.
All right. You may just want to stand there a few minutes. All right, Representative Glanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Dickey, I like this bill. Actually, I didn't introduce the bill, but I actually had a bill drafted in 2008 that did this as well. But my bill had an 8 for 8 in it and it was primarily for businesses to allow these parents of students in schools to take 8 hours off with no penalties to go to their children's school, but the parents would also have to match 8 hours, and that way parents is truly parental involvement. Was that a part of the discussion? Is it part of the future discussion, or is it something you would consider?
It is not part of the discussion at present. So I cannot say it wouldn't be a part in the future, but I think for this year we probably need to take that into consideration and love to pass this as it is, and then I'd love to talk to you further about it.
But wouldn't you agree that parents, really the whole objective is to get parents
absolutely
to make some sacrifices and be involved in their children's educational experiences? Would you agree with that?
Oh, I agree. I think parental involvement, and as Representative over here said, it's not all state employees or parents, but if the students and the administration in these schools see adult involvement, others involved in school, I think it just does wonders for the teachers and administration, everybody involved, students, to see outside people think it's important to be and volunteer at schools. It just sends as you say, just a great message to the importance. I think that's a big problem with our students today. They don't see the priority and the importance of their education. They just don't value it. And when you see adults there in the school system that don't have to be there in the school system doing that, it just sends a great message in my mind.
One last comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I would like to talk with you later about it, because it shows that the state of Georgia care about parents being in the school. We just want parents to care about being in the schools as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next one is Representative Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do too like this bill, Representative Dickey. My question is, was there any discussion about expanding it out to other corporates throughout the state? I know this is a great start. This is like I'm doing it at home here with the state employees now. Georgia Power, and the reason I asked that question is because in some of the mentoring programs I know I've been involved with over the years, when you go out and get these volunteers to go into the schools, in the old days, back in the 90s and the 80s, when I think it's the emergence of more volunteers really became a little prevalent around my area. The problem we ran into is that the background checks and who are you sending into those schools became an issue, because you can't just go haphazardly pick someone that maybe has a reputation in the community, not knowing what their real background is. But in the case of a state employee, you do have a background check already in place. In the case of some of your corporate entities in the state, you already, like a Georgia Power, they've done background checks for their employees, so it makes it easier and puts them in a position. I can kind of envision a Georgia Power line crewman walking in one of these low-performing schools with his Georgia Power suit on, not shirt and tie, and sort of connecting to the kids. I've been where you are. So was there any discussion to expand it?
Well, I don't think discussion is to mandate it, but there was discussion that this really, as I said, sets an example to those corporations and to other companies and other businesses in the community that we think it's a great idea. We think it's very beneficial, and hopefully they would pick up on that and say, let's do that as well. I think it's a great program. Hopefully the administrators and the teachers in these schools will go out and solicit that type of help and make it a situation where they would want, these other companies would want to do that. So yes, I think this is the beginning of wanting to that all participation, community.
Kind of like priming the pump. We can't force that. We can
Right.
do the state, but we can't force them. But this is priming the pump. Look what we're
Exactly.
giving. Let's get everybody else to give too.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
a good suggestion.
So I think it sends a great message.
Yeah. All right, Representative Stovall. You're on.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Dickey. The question I have is, has there been an anticipated cost? I know you probably don't know the exact number, but what the anticipated cost might be?
Yes, it would not be any out-of-pocket cost to the state. This would just be additional leave time, so it really doesn't. It costs the state some hours. These 8 hours of these employees not at their job, but no other direct out-of-pocket cost. So it doesn't have a fiscal thing. So, but as the policy would be developed, supervisors, I envision, would find time or give permission when it's an appropriate time doing their job performance and duties, that it would not impact what they're doing as far as their state job.
What he's actually
But
doing
is
is
it
giving
paid
them
leave?
8 hours of additional time
Yeah.
with pay to go in their schools and work with their children.
That's right.
Work with children.
But I'm saying if it's a 8 hours additional paid leave time, wouldn't that be additional money that has to be accounted for?
Well, I'll ask. What?
No, it's
Okay.
it would be just part of their work hours.
Oh, okay.
You know, so there's no
So like
additional
if it was
funds.
40 hours, they can use part of whatever that 40 hours would have been.
That's right.
For that, okay. I have one more question.
Yes.
As far as I know, Representative Howard mentioned about background check, and I know that in the school system that in my district, that was a huge barrier for parents that would come in volunteer and outside people as well. And so I just want to know, was that a consideration given as far as covering whatever that background check would be, or will as part of one of the rules or regulations or whatever you all are setting up, is making sure you're considering that? Because even though they might be doing a background check for employment, it might not cover child-related issues since they're going into an educational setting.
You want to answer that?
Yeah, absolutely, we would cover that. In fact, I think in that situation, even though we're already doing background checks, we would have to work closely with the educational entities to make sure that we're meeting what their needs are.
They're taking care of policy. Okay?
All right, thank you.
Two more questions. Representative Maxwell. All right. Representative Dixon, is that what you wanted to do?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all right.
We
I have
spent
no
8
other,
hours
I see
on
no
it.
other questions. Do I have a motion? I have a motion to pass. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any other questions? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Go to it. Thank you.
Mr.
Good
Chairman.
bill.
Thank you,
Good
members.
bill. Very good bill. All right. All right. Let's move on to Mike, Reverend Dudley. Let's go finish yours up while we got a full quorum here, because we got. All right, we're gonna make some suggestions on this Title 20 and see where we think we need to go. So, have we handed them out? We're handing you out the amendment now. And Betsy, if you could come to a microphone somewhere, if you could go up to the podium. I hate to put you on the spot. Wherever you feel comfortable up there. And you want to go down, or you want to stay here?
I'll stay here.
Representative Dudley, stay here.
Save some time.
Save us some time. So, what we have here, people, you're getting an LC 336070. That's an amendment. And what this basically does, we have the three types of flexibility right now: IA square, charter system, and status quo. And it is being recommended by the Senate, and we could place this in, and by conversation with the House, we've talked with them about it, is that we continue calling the charter system. That would be a flexibility. I square. We've even talked about calling that the strategic systems, and we could keep that a change. And we've talked about, we don't have a name for the other, but the status quo may be traditional. So, Betsy, explain what this would be. It'd be a placeholder, if you would.
Okay, yeah, this, as you can see, it's not in an amendment form, but we would work these sections into the bill and the order of they appear in the code section. So section 1 that you see would be a section 1A of the new bill. And basically what you have in your hands does two things. One is it basically rebrands IE squared systems as strategic school systems. And the second thing it does is get rid of the status quo language that's in there. So if you'll look, for instance, on line 15, the stricken language there is status quo, so we just replaced it with a school system electing not to request increased flexibility. So if a name is determined that everybody can agree on, we
That's
can
a placeholder.
We can put it in there. If you'll flip over to page 2, the amendment will not include the changes on line 37, 38, and 48 through 50. So the only thing in section 2 will be that new subsection F, line 55 and 56, and that's where it refers to those school systems as strategic school systems. And that, and let's see, the next, and incidentally, section 2 will be renumbered section 1B in the new bill, if passed. And then section 3 of the new document will be section 2A, and it also is basically making that language consistent, the language about the strategic school system, or what we formerly referred to as status quo.
And what we're basically saying, people, what we're doing, already the law is there. We're not changing the law. The law says the schools must choose this year to be status quo, I square, or charter systems. This is simply saying, because there's so much controversy about the names, that we would change these names to charter system, strategic systems, or traditional system. We're putting this as a placeholder. And what I intend to do is bring some of you together, and we'll talk. And any of you that want to have a suggestion for some names, give them to us, and we will take these, and we will, when we present this to this, present this to say, we'll put those names in there. Now, does anybody want to make a comment about this? 28, all right, that's
me.
Representative Carter, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to reiterate one more time that with the new Education Commission that the governor has put in place and its intentions to report back to us and the governor
right.
At the end of the year, that I would love to see a year, the change to a year later for these school systems to make this governance decision.
We've been told no. And there's an attempt right now. There is a bill, a House bill, that has been dropped to do that, which is going nowhere. And there is not going to get over, not going to be heard. There was a attempt in the Senate, but there's no bill draft, so it's been told no. That will not be extended. So I know what you're asking. We could add this to it, and it'd be taken out. And it just kill the whole bill.
That's a real disappointment.
Ma'am?
Big disappointment.
Oh, I agree. Are you aware of House bills? What was it, 237? 327, that we tried 2 years to get it passed, did just what you're saying. It said that schools that were doing well had flexibility. They didn't have to make decisions, but it was never moved.
So
it passed the House. Was it unanimous almost?
Yeah.
Unanimous in the House and never got through.
So whatever the Education Commission comes up with,
will have to be redone or whatever, yeah. I agree with you. Well, we all agree. And we tried it, so I'm just saying no, it won't be sent through. Any other comments? Any other comments? All right, Betsy, where do you say these would, you want to tell us what, is this? I'm going to make this in the form of an amendment, and can you tell us how it would go, and then see if I can get me a second.
Right.
I think I'll get a second, but I want to be sure.
All right, so section 1 would go between lines 29 and 30 of the bill as new section 1A. And then right after that, section 2 of the new language would go in right below that as 1B.
But only F, only part F of section
But only
2.
part F, thank you. And then section 3 will go between lines 49 and 50 as a new section 2A.
And as we take it on through, we may do this in route, probably when we go to the Senate to present, and get your suggestions, we'll all agree on, because this will all come back, because there'll be a change for agreement. We'll have the names in there. Do I have a second on that amendment? Second. I have a second. All right, any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. All right, thank you so much. If you could take care of that. All right, now we got the bill. I made a mistake. I should have had a motion on the bill before I did that. I should have had a motion on that. Do I have a motion on the bill? I have a motion to pass. Do I have a second? Second. All right. Betsy, am I okay? Though I didn't get an amendment, I can. All right, I can do it. All right. Any discussion on the Title 20 bill? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. It passes. All right, Mike, it's yours. Go fight with the Senate.
One of those days.
Okay, thank you. It is one of those days. What a day, I tell you. All right. Now let's go. Margaret Kaiser, Representative Kaiser is going to present her bill now. It is. I'd like to ask Representative Belton. Y'all heard this in subcommittee. What was your recommendation? And what's your number? All right.
Mr. Chairman, we saw this bill. It was unanimous passage for due pass.
Due pass. Okay. Was it unanimous?
Yes, sir.
All right. So Representative Kaiser, who do you have with you, and tell us what about your bill?
I have Chris Adams. Chris, you want to tell him your title?
Sure. I'm an attorney specializing in education law.
And I have my friend, Matt Underwood. I'll let him introduce himself.
All right.
Matt Underwood. I'm the executive director of the Atlanta Neighborhood Charter School.
All right. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to thank both gentlemen here and Matt for taking the time to be here. There are a lot of other supporters, and this bill was brought to me. Well, the bill came about as a conversation with these gentlemen at Atlanta Neighborhood Charter School. You each have a notebook with letters of support from schools that really want this legislation. It's a simple bill, but it's one that is really needed and wanted. The reason for the bill is, I know a lot of you know, I was a founding member of a charter school over 12 years ago. And in the neighborhood where that charter school exists, the homes are now, almost, I don't know that I could afford to live there, and the school's very sought after. And so what happens with these very successful charter schools is they lose their they lose the ability to have the students that are originally within the vision of their charter, which are more of the educationally disadvantaged kids. And so within the attendance preferences, what we're doing in this legislation is to add 2 categories for those schools to be able to capture those groups. One, if you look on page 2, line 39, is educationally disadvantaged students. And then with further discussion, we decided, because of the transient population of military, to add military students as well. There are a couple of changes. One that was brought up in subcommittee that we would like to ask to be amended in full committee. On line 24 on page 1, we are asking to strike "in such case" and add "except as provided in subsection V1." And what that does is it gives those charter schools the option for a weighted lottery. And we have set on the fly, I would say, with Lou Erst and the department, and we've all come to agreement about the language in the bill at this point. So
I had heard a comment. I just want you to comment on it. Is this affecting any kind of money you could get by doing this? Would that affect you?
It would not now. There was an original concern, and Lou, do you want to
that has been
would
corrected?
you like Lou to speak to that, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Ertz, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Our concern was that having only the enrollment priority option and not the weighted lottery option would hurt. And so providing for the language that we've discussed with the
So by putting this amendment in there, it would take care of that?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the charter committee is okay with the bill?
Yes, Greg is here too.
Okay.
Greg, yes.
And
we all met together and agreed on the language.
And Mr. Chairman, in our meeting, we didn't go and ask for a substitute just for timeliness and the weight of work that was in Legislative Council, but we did realize also on page 2 on line 38, just cleanup amendment, we are asking to strike "and" at the end of the line on 38, and on line 39 strike "or" and add the word "and," and then on line 60 at the end of right after disadvantaged students, strike "or" and add the word "and." It just keeps it consistent throughout the bill. That was just an error.
All right. Are there any questions from the committee? All right. Any questions from the committee? 1 minute. Any of y'all want to make a comment? All right.
I would actually love to.
All right. Brevity is important, so anything.
Brevity. All right. Just would say that we are among several charter schools who support the passage of this bill, in part because while enrollment outreach to serve educationally disadvantaged students can get us so far, having the opportunity to have something like a weighted lottery can help ensure that we really have a diverse student population that we serve. So we're supported this at ANCS and several other charter schools as well.
What school do you work with?
At the Atlanta Neighborhood Charter School.
Okay. You want to make a comment?
No, I would just say what Matt said is echoed by several other charter schools in the area that have had have a similar mission and would like to be able to fulfill that mission.
Okay.
And I should have said the letters are in your books as well. So.
And I hate to put Betsy on the spot. I know people have been grabbing her. But now, first of all, I see no questions. I will take a motion on the bill. I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have the second. I have two amendments that I see. Betsy, do you by any way remember what those amendments were?
I can say them real quick.
If you don't, Margaret Hasman can give them.
Yeah, I've got them on page 2. On page 1, I do need the line 24.
On line 24, right, and we're striking in such case and adding except as provided in subsection V1, comma. I can bring it over to you.
And well, V1 talks about state charter special schools. What are we trying to reference there?
Well, V1 is where we have the addition of the two enrollment categories. Wait a minute, sorry. Line 39. Is that not what it said?
Don't try to. We're gonna have this. We're gonna clarify it. So just let them work it out. We'll go. Got it?
Yeah, that's a copy that's doing what you think it's doing.
Do you want to?
Well, let me see.
Tell you what I'm gonna do.
Do you want to help me here?
What's the next bill?
What am I?
Next bill, we
Yeah.
can do Wes's bill.
Betsy,
Tell you what I'm gonna let you do, Margaret.
Let me walk
I'm gonna
over.
hold it. Walk over with her.
Okay.
Thank y'all, and let me bring Wes in. Wes,
Okay.
if you'll come forward and do your bill, that's House Bill 209. Representative Belden, what was the committee's recommendation on that one?
Mr. Chairman, the recommendation was to unanimous, do pass.
All right. So Wes, if you'll go ahead, Representative.
Thank you,
Cantrell.
Mr. Chair. I bring to you
I apologize, Representative.
That's
I said
fine.
Yeah.
I bring to you a 3-sentence bill today that will act as an amendment to the.
Give us the reference to number.
Okay, it's
'cause I know you have a
LC
substitute. Yeah.
Yeah, it's LC 336014S.
Everybody have that?
I got it.
All right.
It's a amendment to the Special Needs Scholarship Act. Basically, when I was campaigning, came across several parents of special needs children and other families who were friends and educators of special needs children and those with learning disabilities who said that in some places schools were not doing an adequate job of communicating this information to the parents that they qualified for this scholarship. So I'm not saying this is across the board, but in certain school systems apparently this information was being put in the back of parent handbooks and not told to parents, not readily available. So all this bill does is it asks the schools, you can read it there for yourself, it just basically asks the school to provide written notice to parents who have a qualifying child during the individualized education program meeting that they have with that family. So the parents will be informed at the IEP meeting that they qualify for this scholarship, and thereafter they would be notified on an annual basis by either it says letter, electronic means, or by other such reasonable means in a timely manner, restating the options. So this way parents could not make the excuse that, hey, we didn't know about it. I found several constituents who said this, and then when I got here, when I got elected and started talking to some of my colleagues, I found out that Representative Stovall had a similar experience. Representative Turner, similar experience, did not know about the details of this. So that's all it is to clarify the communication process.
Okay. You have a question? Representative Dixon?
Yes, sir. We've been required in their IEP meeting to verbally tell the parents what their options are, correct?
Correct. Actually, in writing. It requires that they at that meeting, provide them in writing.
Why do we have to come back every year and tell them again?
Well, the original bill required an annual notice of this. Okay, so I stuck with the original bill's language on that and just added the fact that they needed to be told at the IEP meeting. I'm fine if you want to strike that language. I'm not going to fight for that.
I mean, I would be inclined to strike it. I mean, there's a limit to how much we need to hold their hands through this. We give them the information, we explain it, it's there, it's an option for them.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Representative Dixon, but that's the original act required an annual communication of this information.
At the proper time, we can. You want? Okay. Any other questions? NL 28. That is, who's 28?
Right here.
Representative Carter.
I'm not opposed to it, but I'm trying to figure out, are these parents not getting that annual notice? And if they're not, then there's already a problem with the former bill from what we passed way back when.
Correct.
So if that's the case, then do we need this legislation? I mean, if the problem is that it's just not being done, do we need to add another piece of legislation? Is that going to fix it? Because if it's already in code, then do we need to add another piece saying that they have to let them know annually, specifically at this meeting?
The fix is that if you look at the third sentence, because there was no allegation that it wasn't being done. The idea was that it was being done in a way that parents were not aware of, like such as being placed in the back of a parent handbook, that's handed out at a meeting. It's very big, and parents don't read that portion of it. So basically, it excludes that as being a way of communicating the information, and it keeps the language of I think it's reasonable. A letter, they can send them an email, or any other. They could send a page home with the student, a sheet of paper. There's as long as it's reasonable and not put in the back of a handbook. That's all we're asking.
Got it. Thanks.
Now, this does not prevent it from being put in the handbook after they've done that. Is that correct?
Doesn't prevent it. No.
Yeah. Okay.
It probably would be good practice for them to do so.
All right. I have Representative Stovall. Yeah. Go your. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Cantrell, I appreciate it. I did want to kind of touch on what Representative Carter was asking the question about. And when in my situation with my son some years ago when it was first enacted, it was not told. It was kind of like he said, it was in the back of a handbook, and unless you really was a type of parent that read, I read the handbook but didn't understand it. And so by it being through an IEP meeting, where there's the parents sitting there and all the other administrators, and then you can personally be able to say, hey, this is your information specific to you, because if you're a parent, even if you read the handbook and you didn't understand that this special needs scholarship was available to your IEP student and not just to a general student, then you will end up overlooking. So I know when he brought the legislation to me, I was definitely in favor of it because I personally had experienced that.
All right, Representative. All right, Teasley. Representative Teasley. All right.
Thank you, Representative Cantrell. You talked about in terms of the subsequent notifications that's in the original language. What if on line 17 we were able to strike it where it says the initial and subsequent annual notification, you strike subsequent, and we came up with language that said after that sentence is completed, however, subsequent notifications can be in the student handbook, something to that effect, so it remains consistent with the original language of the bill. The original language that's in code now, but yet doesn't require them to have a face-to-face conversation, a written declaration. Would you be satisfied with that?
I would settle for that. As it says, though, in the second sentence there, it's not asking them for unreasonable means. A letter, an email, and it even gives them the leeway by such other reasonable means. So I personally would. I do not think the parent handbook, or in the back of a thick book, is adequate.
Okay.
Personally, but if that's the pleasure of the committee, I certainly wouldn't stand against it.
Got further questions right now?
Okay. Representative Chandler.
I appreciate Representative Teasley and Dixon what you're saying, but I just from having worked with parents, I don't think there's anything wrong with parents being told this annually. I mean, that's little effort, y'all, and that covers us a little bit better, protects the school, and also, many times the degree of disability may not seem that much when the IEP is originally written, but by the time the next year comes around, there's some real concerns.
That's a good point.
And I would probably have forgotten that somebody had told me about this. That's just my thought.
Okay, any other questions? 25, Representative Dixon?
I would be satisfied, I think, if we change the language simply to say that it will be mentioned at any subsequent IEP meetings. Then you're doing it face to face. And if the parent has a question, they can ask the question right then.
You have a right to do that. That's a form of a motion, so, but any other questions right now? Then we take these motions and amendments or whatever that we think are important. I see no more, so what we'll do at this time, I'm going to ask for a motion on the bill. I have a motion to do pass. I have a second. Now, I have a proposed amendment, so list your amendments, and then we'll see how many we have. But Representative Dixon, you're recognized.
I would say that beginning on line 13, where you have thereafter leave that like it is, and then strike everything below that and say, insert the word in its place, insert the words, at all subsequent IEP meetings, information will be presented to the parents.
All right, Bessie, did you get that? I hope I didn't mess you up. I know you're working yourself to death over there. All right, can you go over that with us and tell us what that would be? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, so you're saying starting on line 13, thereafter all subsequent, thereafter the resident school system shall provide notice at all subsequent IE meetings to the parent.
Is that right?
Correct.
You hear the amendment? Do you object to the amendment? Wes? Excuse me, Representative Cantrell?
I do not.
You
I
do
think
not?
That's fair.
All right, do I have a second? I have a second. Any objection? I have an objection, so we're going to put it to the vote. All in favor of the amendment, read it one more time, if you would, Betsy.
And I actually have a question, too.
All right.
Are we striking the last sentence and doing that?
Strikes everything from there down.
Oh, everything from there down, okay. So then, starting on line 13, it would read, thereafter, the resident school system shall provide notice to the parent at all subsequent IEP meetings.
Period, that's it. All right, who had a question? 17, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just clarification here. Does it mean now that the by letter or electronic means is all gone?
It's all gone.
All gone.
It's all going to be face to face.
They're going to talk to them face to face.
The future notices can be in verbal, is what you're saying.
Verbal, all right. And it still could be in the handbook. It still can be in the handbook.
Yeah, doesn't stop them from putting it in the handbook, but it says that the requirement is that at any future IEP meetings, they must re-inform the
Let's
parents.
reinforce that. Yes, sir.
I would say that it does say written notice in the first sentences, so it's not strictly verbal.
Yeah, all right.
It requires
The first time will be written.
Okay.
That's staying there.
Gotcha.
The first time is not being, it's the following
I
meeting.
apologize.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's all right. Yes, sir.
Is
It's
that
still on.
I apologize, but
No.
is that the first time to the parent or first time to each child? Because there may be multiple children in a home.
Well, it'd be
What
every
that
child,
applies to.
I would assume it's every child they talk with.
It would apply to every IEP meeting that the
Every
parents
IEP,
have.
everyone.
So they would have to notify the parent.
They have
for
10
each-
children, they'd be all 10
10.
IEPs, All right. Any other questions? All right, I have 14. Who is that? That's, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With this amendment, would that not defeat the last language of the bill, which was to make sure that it is not only in a handbook? Do I understand that correctly?
Beat anything further, because if they're required to present it to them in the IEP meeting, it could not only, you could not satisfy the law by just putting it in a handbook. It would have to be presented at every IEP meeting, which is typically going to be, for most students, once a year.
And it'd be more than they're getting now.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. Any other questions? All right, you have heard the amendment. I have a second. All in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Please record, we have one negative vote. Are you a negative vote? Oh, just one, all right. You got that recorded? Yep. All right. Now, The question is on the bill that has been motioned. We're now dealing with due pass for LC 336014S, House Bill 209, and as amended. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. All right, it passed. You're in rules. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now our last bill. Good job. Our last bill now, and we'll come back to you. You ready, Margaret? Come on, if you're ready. If you got it ready, come on. Representative Kaiser, yes. Let's do that one. We have one more bill. Where's Chuck? Hey, Representative, you waited well, man. You paid your dues today.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you, Mr. Chairman.
Has he been here all day? You're going to get the prize. All right. You can take us all to lunch. I mean, to dinner. All right. All right. Yes, go.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, the clarification is on line 24.
Everybody ready? You know, tell us the bill. All right. Be sure you're with the bill now. All right.
Okay. So on line 24, we're striking in such case and instead inserting except for the category included in V1 of this sub-paragraph. On line 45, we are inserting the same language after process. So based on a random selection process, comma, except for the category included in V1 of this subsection, this subparagraph. And then the language is a little different on line 72. We're striking in such case, but in this instance we are saying except for the category included in paragraph 6 of this subsection.
All right. That's your amendment.
Yes, sir.
Anybody want it repeated? All right. Do I have a motion for them? I have a motion from the Representative Kaiser. Do I have a second? I have seconds everywhere. All in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. All right, now we're to the bill. All right, now to the motion. I had a motion and I had a second. So all in favor of the legislation, please indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Oh,
Second Amendment. I'm sorry.
oh, you have a. Let's take that off.
Sorry.
The Second Amendment. I'm sorry. You had a. I thought that was all. Oh, you have a Second Amendment. Okay.
That's right. Right, let me just make sure I've got on line 30. This is why I love this committee. Line 38, we're striking and. Line 39, we're striking or and adding the word and. On line 60, we're striking the word or and inserting the word and.
Okay. That's the Second Amendment.
Yes, sir.
I have a motion. Second. Do I have a second? All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Okay, the amendment. Now we're moving to the House Bills 474, LC 336034 as amended. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed? You pass. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Representative Stration, please come forward. You deserve a big hand. We appreciate you staying around. All right. Where's his bill? Right here. All right, I understand you have House Bill 401, is that correct? Yes, sir. And we're dealing from LC 400825ER, is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's as introduced. Yes, sir.
And this bill has been requested by the Office of Early...
Yes, sir. The
by
Department of Early
decal,
Care
all
and
right?
Learning. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we have a summary page that's kind of going around. This was considered.
Was this heard in subcommittee earlier?
Yes, sir.
All right. What was the motion? Wait, all right.
Mr. Chairman, there is a unanimous do pass.
Unanimous do pass, okay? You're on. Introduce your guest and go to it.
Thank you. This is Deputy Commissioner Ray Higgins with the Department of Early Care and Learning. We also have executive counsel from the department. Mr. Chairman, just to provide a brief summary of this legislation, the purpose is to make administrative and other changes to improve efficiency, operations, and communication within the department, and regulating child care providers, while also maintaining the priority of child safety. The bill does not increase the cost for background checks. It does not increase regulation. It merely addresses some of its cleanup language in a lot of different aspects of the bill. First of all, it helps to streamline the process with which independent contractors, substitute teachers, temporary employees, or similar individuals are screened through the background checks. And primarily this is because if you have temporary staffing agencies or employment agencies or students that are being educated to take these kinds of jobs, it's important that they have those background checks on the front, or at least the opportunity to get those background checks on the front end of their enrollment in schooling for their training, or in their availability to be employed in these locations, so that if they know they're not going to be qualified, that's addressed, or they can know that on the front end rather than as under current law after they have achieved that training or already have been working in the location. It also streamlines the process with which the department's able to accept contributions or charitable donations if an individual wanted to do that. Further clarifies the definition of employee encouraging parental involvement. This is, I think, goes to, in the context of this legislation and what we're doing in early care and learning, to Representative Stovall's issue earlier, allowing a parental volunteer to not be classified as an employee simply for wanting to be involved in his or her child's school. Eliminating the classification of group daycare homes, but these existing facilities would continue to operate under a different description with minimal to no impact on their operations. There will be changes to certain definitions emphasizing early learning and education based on current early childhood and national terminology consistent with national standards. It would provide for improved process around change of ownership of the child care provider, so that if a child care provider business were to be sold, there'd be a streamlined transition as far as the regulatory aspects are concerned. There'd also be some additional cleanup language when questions are brought to the department about needing certain clarification. That's addressed in this legislation. I'd be happy to provide specific commentary about certain lines if, Mr. Chairman, if you or the members of the committee would like. In the subcommittee today, we had many other individuals prepared to speak on behalf of the bill, but their testimony was not necessary, and I just asked everybody to stand in the room. And Mr. Chairman, if that would be acceptable, I don't know how many people have stuck around, but if we could just show that if anybody is here. Okay. I hope not.
We worked with the department.
Just want to say thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee for hearing it today. Just want to say thank you again, Mr. Chairman and the committee, for hearing the bill today. It's a great summary, and we ask for your favorable support.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I've had a lot of communication from some child care providers in my area about the cost of fingerprint checks and so forth, particularly as it relates to volunteers coming in on a periodic basis. Have we been able to reduce that cost any? I mean, they're talking about it's costing them $50-something per instance to have that check done, and they claim that we do it much cheaper in the state elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to kind of catch you on that one.
Sure, no problem at all. Good question. This bill doesn't do anything to change that cost. It is approximately $50. I think it's $52.75 for the national fingerprint-based background check. This bill doesn't do anything to add to that cost or change it in any way. One provision he mentioned when he highlighted that part about clarifying the definition of an employee to encourage parental involvement, that may indirectly address some of those questions or concerns that you may have heard in your community. But as far as the cost, this doesn't do anything to change that.
In what way would that help this?
Sure. Briefly, I'll say a few words on that and then defer to our legal officer. But what we want to do, we believe at DECAL that a parent's first and best teacher, of course, is the parent. But it became a little bit, we run into challenging type situations the way the definition of employee is currently written in the law. And the lines began to blur a little bit when you had a parent, certainly if a parent wants to come and read to their child's classroom or visit in that regard and be in there supervised with the teacher, that's fine. But it became harder to determine when they began to provide, they volunteered more often, or they began to provide more services, to the center. So what we've tried to do here is clarify that when that parent is simply, in my words, just being a parent, that they wouldn't be subject to the national fingerprint background check, which would eliminate that cost on that particular individual.
So that would only apply when it's a parent.
That's correct.
That wouldn't help with like students from the state technical school who come over and might volunteer as a part of their program for a certain number of hours a week during the.
It would depend. It would depend on how they fell in the current definition of an employee. If it's okay, let me refer to Ira Sudman.
Thank you, Representative. Currently, the students from the technical school would not be considered a volunteer. They are covered as considered as a student in training.
Okay.
So they would be subject to this rule.
Subject to the rule.
To require that have a background check, not as a volunteer, but as a student in training.
Okay. So they have to get the background check.
Yes, they do. Students.
How much does a volunteer? How often does a volunteer have to show up before they become subject to it?
It's more than once per quarter.
So if they're once a week, they got to be.
That is correct.
Representative Dixon, that gets your question?
Sort of.
Sort of. You have others?
No, I just
okay.
need.
Anyone else? Why all of this cleanup language at this time? Why all of this? Why all of this at this time? Because I know we've done some couple of times. Yeah.
No,
you did ask that question? Okay. Good.
Sure.
Good question.
I would say what this does in many ways is it allows the department as well as those out in the industry to comply with existing law in an easier and more efficient way, which and sometimes directly but certainly indirectly helps improve child safety. I'd be happy to elaborate further on that. Does that help address your question to a certain degree, or is there any particular area that you would?
Well, no, just because there's so many, so much. Sure. It's hard to get my arms around all of it because there's so much. It's just almost like a Title 20 bill.
Sure.
Yes, Representative Dudgeon.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I made the point in subcommittee, I'll make it again, that we did kind of go over the same parts of the code a couple years ago, and I asked the department, hopefully, did they get it right this time? And they seemed they did. So
okay,
my encouragement is that hopefully this is good enough for a while now, because these things are sensitive to involve a lot of people, and we really don't want to be churning in this area, because like you said, it involves volunteers and fingerprints and all these daycare regulations and so forth. We just not a good thing to be churning a lot of. Do you know what I'm saying?
Certainly, absolutely.
And I know we massaged it before, because we started, about 5 years ago, we started looking at all this and trying to get.
Further, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I did spend a lunchtime reading through it quite well. I've worked with Red Administration about some issues, just double checking that, to the best I can tell, and it's a long, complex bill, best I can tell, it doesn't really add any new regulations or new fingerprinting. It moves a lot of things around. It does streamline some things, but I don't think there's any substantive new items in here that I can tell, that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right, you've heard the bill. You've heard, I see no more comments or questions. Do I have a motion?
Do pass.
I have a do pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. All opposed, like sign. Thank y'all. It's passed. Did a good job. Is this your first time in education? You probably won't ever want to come back. I guarantee you, Mr. I want to guarantee you something. It's been one of ours. The next time you come, you'll be first if you're in my committee. I appreciate you. 1 minute, one comment. We have a couple of bills. Let me tell you, we're going to have one more meeting. Now listen, one more meeting, full committee. We've got to get bills out Monday. It's going to be sometime Monday, so listen for it. We must, if anything we don't pass, and you know how much you want your bills out, so we're going to have any subcommittee. I encourage them to go ahead and meet, get them out, because Monday is it. So we want to help people out. And so, Mike, if you'll list, Representative Dudgeon, give us our bills that are signed.
Just two bills, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 40 by Representative Waits to academic support. House Bill 525 by Representative Mitchell to academic innovation.
That's it?
That's it.
I want to ask y'all, too, there's the Senate bill, the Governor's Recovery District. That bill is being heard, I think, tomorrow. So read that thing. Get the bill out, read it, make your comments, write them down. That will be coming up pretty soon. So be sure you read that and we're not going to have it. I'm just saying it's coming out of the Senate this week. So be sure you read it before it could be coming to us. Thank y'all so much, and I appreciate everybody. Thank you.